Oh,
There we are. Well, at this time, good afternoon, good morning, good evening, wherever you might be in the world. Here we are. And where to start? I knew this week I had some things in my head that I was going to be angry about, but so much has happened in the last 2 days that I'm newly angry about different stuff. And I can't remember the original angry stuff. If you haven't seen Geek Svana's video about CAA making up stories, or making up groups and making up meetings and stuff, you probably should. But it really, in the grand scheme of things, it seems like quite a minor misdemeanor. Other things have been going on. And Ian, I'm not going to drag it out of him too much, has discovered some amazing things about systems this week. Systems and procedures within large government organizations, which are quite extraordinary. But we won't go there. Where should we start? Gentlemen? Should we start on...
We can go there later, because it's stuff that's out in public anyway.
All right, okay. And I didn't know quite how much. Oh, I know how I should have started. I should have congratulated Richard on becoming a parent yet again. And welcome to everybody in the chat. So congratulations to you and yours.
Thank you.
I'm glad it's all going well. So it's Amazon time in the UK. How's that going to work? In Darlington. There we are. That's enough said on that topic. There we are.
Moving along.
That's right. Nothing to see.
What's interesting is originally, if we turn back the clock, 2015-ish, when they first said in the UK they were doing it?
Well, if we could turn back time, if I could, I can't remember the next line. Anyway,
you're going to get a copyright strike on that, though. Don't.
Yeah.
So they did the trials, didn't they, on the farm where they had one person that could order stuff and go from the farm to their hut, within 500 meters, and they were doing that.
Yes.
And they did that for years, didn't they? But they couldn't get the CAA.
I think they did it twice.
Oh, wow. But they don't have the OA as such, do they? So that's the operational authorization. It looks like that's all got to go through yet. And planning permission as well, which was interesting, because if you didn't know this, in the UK, if you use a flying site or a site for longer than 28 days, strictly speaking, you should have planning permission. So they're going through it the correct way, which is quite interesting. So, but obviously they don't have the OA and everything in place. And we know that BVLOS at the minute is still stuck because regulator. So it'll be interesting. They have the money to throw at it, though.
Well, they do. They certainly do. A very warm welcome to Stephen from Wind Racers. Stephen's just had, in fact, let's just hazard. How good you can hear me. That's grand. Let me quickly let's just jump to. No, let's continue with Amazon, and then we'll jump across to Stephen. So, what's this? If you order a drone from Amazon, will it be delivered by tube stock? Yes, something like that. But the UK, this announcement comes the week after they stopped operations in America because the thing keeps falling out of the sky. So how's that work?
Lives are not worth as much.
True. That is true. Very true.
But in fairness, what's happening in the US?
I hope that wasn't the cause, because if rain causes failures, I think the last place to be flying it is around
Darlington.
Yeah, but was it actually rain that actually caused the incidents? Now, I know.
Oh no, I'm not saying it is. I was posting.
Yeah. But those incidents happened at the test site. That's what a test site's for. Yeah. A test site is for incidents. I think that there's probably been a little bit of a meal made about what happened in the US because it was happening at a test site. That's what you do at test sites. You can crash drones and you can stress test and you can do all that kind of stuff. That's what it's for.
Do you think he's been misrepresenting something about drones? That's unheard of.
Yeah. I think, Stephen, what you're saying is an entirely fair point there. I think the only thing I would say on it is they are, several years, probably even 10 years. It's a long time they're into the game. It's a long time into it to be having problems. But you still make a good point. That's part of how you go through your iterations and squash the bugs and deal with the issues.
Well, you've got
I
to
wonder
check
what the
all your-
CAA's advisory committee would have to say about that. The group they consult with. That is something to say.
that's in Geeks video, yes.
But
Is
Stephen,
is that the advisory committee of 1,000 people? That's really two. Obviously, I'm exaggerating the figures now, but
And
I've told you a million times. Yeah. Well, it's, but just from looking at it, it's a pretty rubbish solution. I'm really glad Stephen from Wind Racers is here because I could. It's a huge solution. Is it £5 it lifts? Isn't it something like that? So it's a lot of airframe just to lift £5, and I'm not convinced of the shape of the thing and any sort of winds from the side. It's going to be really hard to.
Is that
to
even
keep
legal
that
in the UK? Haven't you gone metric? Aren't pounds illegal?
yes,
yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
Yes, okay, yes.
Yeah, I was having to count myself there and think pounds. What the hell is it?
see,
Yeah.
I actually think if you're going to do it, why wouldn't you not use a DJI fly cart?
Oh
Because-
yeah, absolutely, all day long, all day long.
Because it's
Because
solid
according to
machine.
our CAA, the arms will fall off it.
Yeah, don't get me wrong. The CAA's the slight niggle, if you like, because you'd have to get it past them. But a DJI fly carts, they can do the distance, they do the range, they've got the endurance. Those things are now getting more and more proven all the time. And would you trust? I would rather trust. No offense to Amazon and their designers. Right now, I'd rather trust the DJI fly cart to do the job.
I think to be fair, we're probably being unfair because I know I've spoken to someone that's been involved in Amazon in the past, and they've definitely got the very smart people there. I'm sure with the money they've got, they will have amongst the best people involved. If not, I'd be saying why not? Because you've got, they'll have bottomless pockets compared to most organisations. So I think they'll be further along and will have got through a lot more than people suspect they have. Because there is a lot of this. It's all like non-disclosure and all that round the whole Amazon thing. So everyone's kind of, you won't hear stuff coming out of it because it'll be all. People would really get in bother if they spoke about what went on there. So,
But Wing seems miles ahead, doesn't it? Wing is sort of like way out in front.
well, no, when you hear organisations going on, often those shouting the loudest really aren't getting ahead. So the fact you're not hearing much, I wouldn't put too much credit.
But just look at public trials. I mean, Wing's got public trials everywhere, and they're carrying stuff across London and everything. I don't see Amazon doing that.
No.
Well, but I think the order for me at the minute would go something like Zipline, Manor, Wing. I don't know where I start coming after that. Maybe Amazon.
Ehang. I like the Zipline thing. I think they have got something very unique.
You can't have very unique.
But I think that they've got a really good niche because they're actually concentrating on areas that do need it rather than going into built-up areas and saying that let's do this. They're doing it in areas where you don't need much authorization in terms of flying over people or whatever it is, or flying over built-up areas. So, but I like their solution. They have a really cool solution, and it seems to work. But again, getting back to this, that Amazon are having. I mean, it seems to be that there's a lot of focus on Amazon. I think because it's Amazon and people are having a little bit more focus on them. And when they have incidents, it's kind of in the spotlight. But airlines now, if we look at airlines, if we look at manned aviation, where there's incidents all the time, right? There's incidents all the time, but there's no real focus on, they are, they're not doing things properly or whatever it is. Whereas when there's incidents happening in the unmanned, like if we take, for example, Orlando, right? What's happened in Orlando, and Sky Elements have had their Part 107 waiver actually suspended. How many airlines have had their license suspended for just an incident? I think it's a bit unfair.
True. Yeah.
Dual standards.
It is unfair, if you like, because look at Boeing, and and I hate to bring it up, but they literally, that's 2 full planes. That's nearly 600 odd people. And while the plane was suspended from flying, which was the right thing, we had You know, the M210, when they were falling out of the sky, the CAA here pulled them and says not in a built-up area until there's a fix. But you know, it's crazy that Boeing.
I was going to say Boeing is getting grilling now. They were getting. I think it was a senator or something that I'd seen on TV this week, and they were getting torn to shreds. He even more or less insinuated that. Well, he specifically said whistleblowers were fearing from their life, almost suggesting there was something sinister there as well. So, because they were saying basically the chief executive or whatever you call him at that level in the US was just getting his pay has just ballooned. You know, he's doing really cushy out of it all. Meanwhile, staff there have seen, you know, that they feel that, you know, their wages haven't moved, and they're not really given the. He basically said that it came across like Boeing were being asset stripped, and you know the staff were demoralised, and you know potentially they were the ones that have been losing out. So yeah, I think that it's true though that there still is double standards, and you know, manned aviation gets a bit of again, it's the old skin in the game. There's just this assumption that there won't be corners cut there, and the assumption is, oh well, if it's drones, yeah, maybe there has been. So Stephen makes a good point that really, when you're having your permission taken away before you investigate, you know, whilst an investigation is ongoing, you know, that's killing off your business. This shouldn't, you know, you're thinking, well, should you at least go in and actually realise that something's been done wrong before you actually start having repercussions? So there's probably
what really annoys me is that they tell us we should aspire to the same levels of performance as manned aviation, which means going backwards.
I don't aspire to manned aviation safety levels. I aspire to be drone safe, to fly a drone safely.
Well, Mitchell's just reminded me of one of the things I wanted to talk about, because I made it the picture for this. So I'll forget this now. We'll come back to it later. I'll come back to it. I'll try and come back to it. But we've got Richard here, Altitude Angel. What do you see from the airspace point of view, from the integration of this Amazon thing? Have they spoken to you, or do they bring their own UTM? Somewhere up here, somewhere around here.
I'm just working out what all the pointing's for. Everyone's pointing fingers.
Accusations.
I think it depends on your definition of UTM, right? And the only reason I bring that up is everyone's got a slightly different one. I think when most people talk about it, they're generally referring to software that they've built to manage their fleet. So for us, that's a fleet management software. UTM is the software and the services and the procedures you build in order to figure out how you get lots of fleets all sharing the same region of airspace. So I think one of the common threads we see, particularly in the UK, is that generally the tool that the regulator has to do approvals for these types of things is to separate what one operator is doing from other operators. So I would be surprised if the Amazon test facility up in Darlington, I think it is, isn't in some kind of separated or segregated airspace, a TDA or a TRA. Whilst I think that's really important, and we do lots of testing, we've done lots of them already. And I think what the world really needs, and what we desperately need in the UK, particularly with a very small airspace in comparison to, say, the US, is to figure out how we get lots of operators all sharing the air at the same time. So in other words, if we'd like another company to also be able to fly in Darlington alongside Amazon, we need to figure that one out. Now, Darlington, you know, nothing against our local Darlingtons folks, but clearly it's not London or Birmingham or Manchester, where you have, you know, in some instances, millions of people within a small area. So you're going to need multiple operators being able to fly. So I think, you know, we need to figure out how we do the integration piece. And actually, that's part of the CAA's overall strategy, right? In the UK, the airspace modernization strategy talks about integration, but hasn't yet figured out how it does that. So that's one of the reasons we exist, to support that kind of work.
So I think that one of the main things I've been hearing actually today since that news came out, and you know, when you look online and you look at the Facebook groups and other chat online, is that operators, other drone operators go, "Oh, great, there's no Amazon. That means we can't fly anymore." So there's this real negative aspect about this. But I think you're completely right, Richard, and that's something which I've always experienced when I've been dealing with, drone operator things like Mana and other operators that are working. They actually welcome and they want to have other drone operators working in the same airspace because they want to learn how to communicate and how to work with them. Because if there's going to be any industry which should grow and there's going to have this, that, and the next thing, there has to be some kind of compliance with everyone. But I think that there's just this negative attitude from the community because they're not educated enough in such a way to understand, and there's not that actual communication coming from the other side from Amazon, because they're such a large company and all they want to concentrate on is getting drone deliveries. But they should be out there actually communicating to say, we actually welcome you flying in here because it actually benefits everyone.
I thought, let's look at Rich's map and look at Darlington and look at this TRA in the UK for tomorrow. It's huge. It's going up here. What's that? Is that a Royal flight? What is that? What on earth is that? That's obviously different times on it, but that's a huge.
Oh, it's for a helicopter.
Yeah, that's not for Amazon. That can't be for Amazon.
No. That's not Amazon. I just thought,
it's a helicopter.
Right. Where's Darlington then? That's up north somewhere, isn't it?
North. Near Newcastle.
I'll just say while you're looking for that, Gary, because you said before we went on air that the birth it was the kind of birth of the railways. You're not wrong. It was the first. What's it say? Steam engine. There was kind of like a first line for what do you call it? Where you're transporting cargo between Darlington and somewhere else. Darlington to Stockton.
Stockton, wasn't it? Yeah. There, Stockton Tees. So there we are. So what's that? That's Teesside. What's that? A kite flying site. Okay. Model flow. Well, they can go.
So going back to the airspace stuff, remember there is a NATS consultation at the minute on open air, or I like to call it NATS pay to fly, because it's been proposed or whatever that NATS control. NATS would be like the top layer of the UTM or something. Richard, correct me if I'm wrong in what the proposal was, because you're probably more aware than me. But NATS, it's proposed that NATS is like the big player who monitors everything, and then if you want a UTM, it'll be unsat just underneath NATS or something else. And it's like, hang on a minute, NATS has got the monopoly for all of UK airspace all of a sudden for monitoring and doing everything, which means Altitude Angels then got to stick. So you're going to have NATS taking their slice. You're then going to have Richard, who will want his piece, for example, because it could be big.
It won't be a slice. It'll be like this.
Well, we already know there's a massive disparity in pricing, because if you was to go to East Midlands Airport and you want to land a small Cessna, it's actually quite reasonably priced. You want a drone flight, it's more than having your Cessna on the airfield overnight. You know what I mean? It's crazy.
Yeah, I was going to say, Richard, you're in trouble for that, because we've got airports now charging drone pilot more than
actually, we want a pint of blood now.
So your salespeople, I think, are pushing this money side.
Yeah,
a little too hard, I'm afraid.
Right, pint of blood, please, Richard. Come on.
Let's stay metric.
Where shall I start? So we had the question there around NATS, right, in open air, and I think everything that open air is, is kind of purporting to be is in the public domain at the moment. Yep. There is a consultation, which I think you rightly point people to. I think that closes on Friday, actually. So if we haven't, if you've got things to say, you should definitely say those in there. We're proud to be supporting the open air team as part of a consortium with lots of other drone operators. I think Wing are in that consortium as well. I'm not entirely sure I would describe it as a hierarchy, though. I think the way, certainly I've understood the articulation of open air, is that if we are going to have a kind of equitable, fair access to the airspace with, competitor A and competitor B sharing the airspace together, either competitor A and competitor B need to figure out how they're going to exchange surveillance information between them, or someone's going to have to be the sort of trusted man in the middle, so to speak. And I think the challenge today is, as far back as, say, 2016, for instance, speaking from first-hand experience, we created something called UTM Exchange, which was an early attempt to try and have, at the time, competitors sharing flight information so that we could build an accurate picture on drone safety map for who was flying where. And we were met with a stone wall, effectively, from competitors that viewed that information as very competitively sensitive, as opposed to very, very open and something which should be shared with everybody. To this day, in fact, you can still go to Drone Safety Map, and for free, everybody can see where everyone else is planning to fly. So we still subscribe to that belief. But I think everyone would probably agree, if we are going to have, I don't know, Amazon Wing and a whole bunch of others, Wind Racers, Deliveries, everybody in one area, then somehow we need to have a trusted source of surveillance information and a trusted source of flight plans. I think one other issue with that is there are things that fly around in our airspace that arguably most people don't know about. There are national state security concerns, etc. And being able to know about those things without knowing what they are, in other words, how can you tell someone ahead of time that they can't fly there right now? A, if you don't know about it because you're not NATS, and B, because you have no other way of sensing it. So I think there is a reasonably good case for someone to run some kind of service. What the commercial model is for that service, I think, again, I'm a public member of that consortium, and there are confidentiality agreements in place there. But what I think it would be, fair and reasonable to say is that as a customer of Open Air, we clearly want to understand what the value is going to be, particularly if that has an impact on our existing business operations. So I think there is a magnifying glass on the Open Air program right now from the drone community, from the existing aviation community, and from the CAA, and from NATS itself. And I think that's appropriate.
Quick question, though, and now it slipped away in an instant, didn't it? I'm getting old. I had the thought and it went.
Dementia.
Dementia.
You said it for you.
But here's
yours go, Gary.
So if it doesn't matter about the two UTMs, though, here's the kicker. It doesn't matter about who's flying on what UTM. So it doesn't matter who's using Richard and who's using someone else. That's completely irrelevant. Each UTM can see the other aircraft regardless, we're assuming, right? So we assume that both systems can detect and see the other drones that are flying in the area. Your drones are going this way. Now, if their drones are going the same way, you're tracking it the same. It would be...
I think that's a broad assumption you've made, though, right? I mean,
I'm
not aware yet of other UTMs that have a surveillance and tracking capability that isn't dependent, right? And I think that's the other aspect. And if you're a regulator, and far be it from me to support regulators and NDAAs, I've had some interesting discussions over the years, but solving a problem is what the regulator is trying to achieve, right? And I don't understand how any regulator or anybody, just being reasonable, could make the assumption that everyone can see everything, right?
Well,
and I think that's the issue, right?
Yeah, I mean, we do need electronic conspicuity, actually. At the end of the day, we need manned aviation to go form electronic conspic, and then we need to follow once it's proven to work with manned.
Again, that doesn't work, though, as we always have this conversation when we're here, because you've got the non-conspicuous. You have to deal with them as well. So that's why...
and that's a challenge, right? I don't think anyone would disagree that more EC is helpful. But it's certainly not a panacea or a magic bullet or a safety, or a safety case in and of itself, right? And you only have to go so far as the lawyers in the room to eventually ask the question: well, who is liable in the event of hitting an aircraft? Even if you're in one of these so-called transponder mandatory zones, right? And the question I always ask is: well, if one of my customers is doing some flying, they're flying beyond visual line of sight, there's no pilot in the loop, or maybe there's a remote pilot, but they're trusting the EC, they're in the TMZ, right in the epicenter of it, and then they smash into an aircraft which, for whatever reason, let's just say it hasn't got a transponder or it failed and it wasn't working. Whose liability is it? Well, the way the law is written today, it's the remote pilot, right? It's not the person who is in breach of the TMZ rules, although there's probably a separate set of hell coming that person's way if they're ever caught. But it's ultimately your responsibility And I think until we can shift that balance, then you're not going to see multiple operators. You're not going to see a heavy dependence on EEC. And then, of course, you've got other aircraft which, frankly, aren't going to broadcast. You know, if you're flying around in a police helicopter, you're probably not going to broadcast your location willingly on very common sort of easy to pick up ADSB on a Raspberry Pi. Perhaps you're clever and use Mode S, and that confuses people for a little bit. But overall, there are problems, right? And I think that's the challenge. So yeah.
Well, let's get manned aviation. Now, where's your ticker, Gary? This is one for your ticker. You got a manned aviation ticker, or you used to have one.
Have I? Did we?
Manned aviation above a certain height. You used to have one.
Oh, you mean that one?
Yeah. You know, get the police helicopters up, because police helicopters don't need to sit at 400 feet or lower.
Well, you don't say that, because Dave from Police Helicopters is in the chat. He'll come and get you. He'll come and get you.
They want to stay out of rifle range, don't they?
Yeah, but people would hear the helicopter at 400 feet. Helicopters, you will know. You know, bad people, helicopter, 400 feet. Oh, right, it's there. You know, if it's going for an emergency or searching for someone, maybe it might come down. But actually, they'll sit at 600 to 800 feet anyway. And over towns and cities, they'll even cruise at 1,000 plus, because they are meant to be. Although they can go
above
lower.
the streets and houses.
Yeah, they can.
Yeah,
go lower.
I know. But
so you make a good point, right? You'll hear the helicopter if you're there. If you're not, and there's no pilot, that's the challenge, right?
Yeah.
But that's a tree in the woods. What do you hear?
Not if you hit the tree.
It's a helicopter there. If you can't hear it, is it really there? Yeah.
Yeah. So coming back to the point, then I think someone's got to do something about that kind of intermediate layer. And NATS does maintain a surveillance picture in the UK today. Getting that data is actually virtually impossible from NATS. So actually, we welcome any move where NATS is opening a surveillance picture. But you know, there's a trial going on right now, and I think it's got like a 5-month time frame left on it, something like that. Don't quote me. Someone in the chat will probably Google this in the background, but it's around 4 or 5 months, I think, remaining on that. And you know, as I say, we are keen members of that consortium because we represent like 390,000 drone pilots across the UK, which is still a staggering number. And our job really is to make sure that everyone gets the safest information as quickly and as cheaply and as efficiently as possible on the same terms as everyone else. And the airspace will hopefully get a lot busier, but that doesn't mean less safe. But certainly it's never going to get any busier if we keep excluding everyone else from regions while a drone bimble's about. So that's got to be fixed.
Well, I must admit, the instant I saw it, the announcement this morning, I thought, oh, wouldn't it be good if Richard put some of his towers all around that and got a really good idea of what Amazon was doing? Then I thought, oh, just imagine just how angry Amazon would be if someone went and gathered data. And then I thought, oh, yeah, we could just do that with Raspberry Pis, because I bet they make them use ADSB. So, you know, I think there's a whole load of issues with that. But I do want to show, Stephen's kindly joined us from Wind Racers. I want to get this picture up because, and I've been wanting to say this for ages. As the Amazon thing is overly complex, this is such a simple looking thing. I mean, how can this be cutting edge, and how can this be on it? No, I love this platform simply because of that. You can tell it's going to do what it says on the tin, and it's, well, I can't think of the words right now.
You got it correct. I mean, we wanted to create right from the start. I'm not a tech guy. I'm not an engineer. And so for me, I think we just wanted to go with the more traditional aviation design. I mean, we've had 100 years or more of brilliant engineers, probably better than each generation in aerospace, coming up with designs which have been tried, tested, and crashed probably multiple times. And so we want to stand on the shoulders of giants and design. So we've deliberately gone for, in quite a lot of aspects of the airframe, for traditional design. And I think the more innovative stuff is in the avionics and the software side of the piece, because we wanted it to be completely autonomous. But the design itself is meant to be robust. It's the original mission we're aiming for was the delivery of humanitarian aid in the developing world, and so you need to have something which is pretty bulletproof. If you pardon the pun, well, it probably needs to be bulletproof as well, but to actually be able to operate in those environments. So it's supposed to be robust and reliable, and that's been core of the design right from the get-go.
No, it's always impressed me as a design. But I think I want to throw it to Bruce, our aeronautical engineering expert. Have you had any thoughts on this one? Seen it?
Yeah, simple as best.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah, it is, isn't it? And what sort of weighting cargo, and how high, how fast, how far, all that sort of thing.
I mean, it's the original design brief was to carry 100 kilograms over 1,000 kilometers, which, if you look in the aid context, is probably to be frank, probably the minimum you want to be doing. But it actually, with this new Mark II, we can actually carry a heavier payload than that. So the precise range, we haven't taken it out to test yet, but that's a spec we were aiming for: 1,000 kilometers, 100 kilograms.
100 kilos is an interesting number, because, of course, for years delivery drones have been playing around at 1 kilo, 2 kilos, 5 kilos, 5 pounds. Yeah. And I've never thought that was going to be where it was at.
I sort of my background is sort of in transport logistics and in investing in that area. The trouble is, to make the maths work is extremely challenging. To get the numbers, so the cost to get to a cost-effective level. You're probably all aware of this, but the normal benchmark is dollars per kilogram per 100 kilometers, and probably the benchmark. And really, this is the minimum you have to get to be economic, is about $1 per kilogram per 100 kilometers. So if you think that immediately sort of tells you that if you're carrying a lot more and over a longer distance, then you're going to make more money. But I struggle to see how the economics can work when you're carrying 1 kilogram on a rotation. Because you're being paid $1, that ain't very much to cover all your costs.
I think most people have been doing lower weights, though, because the regulatory framework is much easier to work with. And if you're below those key things, once you've developed your technology, the basis of your technology and your procedures and so forth, you can then scale it to economically viable levels, can't you?
I think that's the idea. I think the risk is you get caught in a technology trap, that your existing technology limits you to what you're doing. And ultimately, if you're looking at the sort of ranges we're talking about, what payloads we're talking about, fixed wing is really the only reasonable solution. Unfortunately, it's physics and economics drives you in one direction.
So we don't have any international helicopter flights. Europe.
Sure. And helicopters are very expensive. They just don't carry this type of cargo anywhere in the world in manned aviation. So there's a good reason for it. There's a lot of useful applications for helicopters. Don't get me wrong, of course, but they aren't for cargo carrying. It's just not used.
I think it could be used all day long in the parts of where I am here in South Africa, moving stuff about. I can see it. The regulatory environment's still not there. Where have you been doing most of your testing and things? I think you've been doing some testing in Ukraine. I think you've got an ISR version.
Well, to be frank, the Ukraine's a great test area. If I'm honest, my view is you'll have the drone companies which are operating in Ukraine, and they'll be the survivors, and the drone companies are not in Ukraine, and they won't survive. And because the level of technology development you're getting there is just phenomenal. We're just getting. We have to do this sort of rapid innovation because we're just getting so much feedback sort of almost every day from the guys of mods they need, and it's clearly quite a challenging environment. So you really get given the things which are pretty critical to help you operate. But a lot of the things we've developed read through directly to civil applications. So it's driven us forward massively, and unfortunately, I know it's a great tragedy, but it's allowed us to develop and I originally created the company for humanitarian aid delivery, so military applications wasn't top of my list, but it's been very useful in the business of how we've been able to develop.
Well, I deliberately mentioned it because I'd have figured I thought you might not, because hats off to you. You haven't made a big banging of drums saying, "Look," as some American companies have done. We're in Ukraine. Look how good we are, and their equipment's been rubbish.
It's interesting. Our team was out there at one of the test sites the Ukrainians use, and they have an enormous hangar there, full of drones of all different types of drones. It's almost a who's who of the drone world. But where they've tested them, they've tried to use them, they've decided they're not useful, and they've just been put in there in cold storage. So
to be fair, though,
it's a pretty brutal environment commercially to survive it.
To be fair, though, if you're flying in Ukraine or in that region and your drone crashes into an oil refinery, that's considered a success.
Absolutely, yeah. They are a bit more tolerant of accidents there, that's for sure. So if you want to have accidents testing the drone, that's probably the place to do it. You're totally right.
Stephen, are wind racers attending the Sect D event in Helsinki tomorrow?
Unfortunately, I wouldn't know if we were doing it. So I'd have to.
Okay.
One of my colleagues who would be handling that. I'm quite sure probably not, but I don't. Okay. I can't really speak for everyone in the firm.
Yeah, no, I'm actually attending the event tomorrow. But
right. What's the subject of the event? Or
it's basically defence, but there's a very high amount of drone company activity there.
It's quite an unusual market, the defence market. I don't have any background in it, and nor do my teammate, except for our chief of flight operations. And so, just getting used to how they work, how the procurement cycles work, or whatever. It's quite a challenge, and it's. But the message we keep on getting is they just want proven use cases in Ukraine. And that's the only thing which counts. So, we've spent a lot of time supporting the Ukrainians to allow them to get the best out of the platforms. And we've probably got now 5 use cases in Ukraine which we're operating.
And on a little bit more mundane level, you've been operating trials for the post office, I think, as well, in various parts.
Yes, we did. We did a number of trials sort of out to the Isles of Scilly and around the Orkneys and the Shetlands. And going back to something that sort of Richard's mentioning about the UTMs and trying to integrate. The thing is, I think we've got to get to a stage before that, which is to actually have a commercial service operating with these aircraft. There are just so many trials that I think probably Richard's sick of them. I'm certainly sick of them. And being in endless trial mode, we need to actually move to somewhere just actually operating a proper commercial service. And that's what we want to do in the Orkneys. But in a way, to prove to ourselves and indeed also the market that you actually can operate these aircraft, provide a service which has value, and that customers want to use. And so we have done it on a trial basis with the post office, but we want to do it much more extensively and indeed actually operate in the Orkneys and just allow all comers to ship whatever they want on the aircraft. And because so no one's actually gone out to prove that there's a commercial market in the developed world for this technology, and it's such a basic step, which we need to cross that chasm, I think.
But as it is the most basic step we need. But our problem is in the UK lies squarely at one point, your bottleneck, and that is the regulator.
But the Orkneys is a very brave place. Why not the Bahamas? I mean, it's a very brave place to be trying to. Because if you can run it there, you can run it anywhere.
Well, for sure. I know there's a good reason why there are not many trees in that part of the world. So talking about crosswind tolerance,
falling starships.
We clearly sort of trying to develop a platform which has got a high crosswind tolerance, and also with fixed wing, you've got the opportunity to always take off the land into wind. But I think it's a very challenging environment to operate in. And I think you're talking about rain ingress as well. So we've got a lot of it up there. So yeah, you're totally right. We're UK based, so we wanted to find a location in the UK, which also has a lot of transportation challenges. So someone in the Orkneys, you certainly don't get Amazon Prime there. Like you're waiting several days to get your package. A letter will take probably 3 days to get there, where it would normally take 1 day in the UK, anywhere else in the UK. So there's some real transportation challenges, a transportation penalty, which the people have living in that part of the world. And so we felt that there's a good opportunity that this technology can actually make a difference there. And so and it's so suited to what we're trying to do, and it's a place where we have the possibility, as you say, if the regulator allows us to actually operate a proper service there.
Let me share.
I agree by the way, with what you're saying entirely, Stephen. I think everyone is desperate to get to a point where this stuff is routine and can deliver commercial benefit to customers, whether it's Royal Mail or a local estate agent, or it's Amazon delivering packages to your door. I think the challenge, certainly as we see it, is getting to even a basic level of commercial routineness requires assurances and safety, which can't really be given to the regulator without something like a UTM system in place, or without having a safety case predicated on the exclusion of everybody else in the airspace. I think that's the regulator's flowchart at the moment. And I think there's definitely a saying, isn't there? Never let perfect be the enemy of good enough. Well, I think the regulator's equivalent of that should be safe enough. But I think, I've had many conversations with individuals at both the CAA here in the UK and other NAAs around the world, where actually they hold drones up to a sort of panacea, a standard of zero tolerance, which actually crude aviation is typically not held to. So I agree with you entirely. I just think we are probably a lot closer to having those UTM systems, but not yet having the right regulation in place, which should change in the next couple of months.
The reason why we chose the Orkneys is, one of the reasons as well is it's a great map you pulled up there. You can see there's a lot of islands, so you can imagine the transportation challenges there. But also there's just very little traffic there, and I think that is where we've got to start. Is like choosing Darlington right next to Teesside Airport. I think you're over a very populated area, and that's quite a challenging place to kick off. We're flying mostly over water in a place with very little air traffic. And very identifiable air traffic. So we hope I think that does give us scope to try and come up with something which is a bit more practical.
Let's just say, how many are these the airfields up there? How many airfields?
These are sort of predominantly grass strips or small strips. Quite a few of the islands have those strips on them. The main airports are clearly is Kirkwall, which actually I think it's international. So it's we're aiming to sort of fly out to all the islands, and we've got the capability to drop cargo, which I think will be the mode of delivery actually in the future. It's got so many benefits, which I think you guys can.
Parachute dropped.
Well, looking at
it's it's how we're going to be delivering humanitarian aid is because it just avoids any intervention on the ground.
Just stay airborne and go home like zipline.
Absolutely.
Well, looking at the Orkney Islands, I would have gone with from mainland to the Orkneys would be the Wind Racer, and then depending upon the islands, I will try to find a central spot, and actually from there I would then reach out with something like the DJI cart for that stuff. So I would take the majority, 100 kilos or whatever you can carry, as much as we can to a centre point, and then from there I will use the DJI cart to then deliver out from that point. And then to get to the other islands that are further out, then obviously the Wind Racer could then go on again, or another one is going to the further out islands, and then it's repeated. So I'll be landing at one spot and then using, like the DJI cart or multi-rotor to then do. This is
what needs to be worked out is what can work commercially, and I think once you're transshipping, suddenly your economics gets very challenging. As I say, I think small cargoes are very challenging on their own. The other thing I think is the crosswind tolerance of multi-rotors. I think they're going to find most of the time they ain't going to be fine in that part of the world.
Yeah, I mean the DJI cart is so cheap though for what it can lift. That they are really.
I think it's a great bit of kit. I'm totally with you, and I think they'll dominate that end of the market.
Well, they will in Asia for sure. But
Asia they will, but I don't see much happening in Europe or whatever.
Yeah, I agree with Steve.
But it's interesting. Earlier I said 2, 3, 1, 5 kilos is where it sort of started. DJI landed at 30 kilos. When they brought their delivery drone out, and now the 90 in China is flying 100 kilos. So they started playing the game at 30 kilos. I know the Agros and all that is can take a load, but it's a heck of it. They've seen the writing on the wall, haven't they? To a certain extent, they've seen 100 kilos and up is a useful number. And I think
I think last week they've tested they started testing an unmanned craft, and I would wager it's probably a Renage pilot, I guess, but who knows? But they've tested an unmanned craft that can carry 1,000 kilograms. I'll bang it in the private chat.
Yeah, they say one which is at that level. I think there was an article on it just a few days ago. But and the problem is, actually, this is why we need to get into the field and actually start operating a service. Because, very frank, I don't know whether 100 kilograms is the right number, or whether it's 200, or whether it's 50. And because until you are actually operating a network and a proper delivery service, you just won't have any data to determine that. So you could be right; it could be 1,000 kilograms. I don't know, but it's but we need to actually get some proper commercial data to be able.
I mean. There's different markets where different weights will work. I mean, obviously we've seen what Manor are doing with low cargo, but there is an economic case there that was being proven by Uber Eats and Just Eat and all that. People are willing to pay for deliveries of food, that can work.
I think the challenge, what the other thing which we delivery done is try to make our aircraft multi-mission. So that's been a big driving force in Ukraine, and not on the military side, but there's a civil equivalent. Because I think you'll have a challenge if you just say delivering the mail, because for example, the post office, they will only want to actually have the aircraft operating on the deliveries being made between 4 and 8 in the morning. And so then you've got 20 hours where your aircraft's sitting idle. And this, so what we've deliberately done is try to set up so we can actually perform other missions in that downtime. And I think, and so you're talking about the food delivery, which is great. I mean, if they can beat a guy on his on minimum wage on his motorbike, they're doing pretty well. But and good luck to them. But but that's just going to be in quite limited hours, and really you need to get them. If the aircraft aren't flying, you're not earning.
Yeah, I mean, perfect for you, Stephen, would be like, you know, you've got DPD, you've got FedEx, you've got DHL. If you can service all their companies, they get to a central, you know, they get to a point at the top there for you, and then you just start flying it all out to the Orkney. That would be fantastic. You would actually change people's lives. But the problem is, you know, it's the bottleneck, and nothing. I don't think anything's going to change this year with the CAA, unfortunately. I think they're stuck at a certain point that they can't get past yet, you know, until they decide what they, you know, to totally accept. Because you would, as Richard says, you know, or sorry, Stephen, even, you've got to have completely locked off airspace at the minute. You know, you end up with a temporary danger area or something, which is just crazy.
So you can't just drop mail at the Orkneys and then swing by Russia on the way back and loose off a few munitions.
But I think, we definitely need to find a solution to that regulatory conundrum. You can appreciate the CAA's an issue that they don't want to set a precedent, but I think we need to get over that, because we actually need to start flying. And I think, like Richard said, so you're just aiming for perfection means it's just never going to happen.
Well,
and indeed, we're going to get the UK is going to just be beaten by other jurisdictions. We're being more pragmatic. Huh?
Well, we already are behind because, as everyone said, you know, everyone's going future flight. It's not a future flight at all. It's all backwards flight now. Everything in future flight's been done somewhere. You know, it's all our only stumbling block now is, you know, I think the CA said SORA would unlock BV loss, or they'll unlock it, 2026? So you've got at least a year, which is crazy.
And we, for sort of commercial companies, which everybody's operating in market is commercial, these long time frames just are death, basically. And I think nearly every week there's a drone company going bust. Yeah, because you just can't have this an endless roadblock and these long times. It just doesn't work.
And the problem is the CAA is meant to grow the industry. You know what I mean? They're meant to be pushing and growing the industry. And sometimes you feel like I'm going to have to write to an MP or the Minister for Aviation and go, look, this is what we need to do. We are falling behind. You know, future flight is done. It doesn't, you know, you just send stuff to.
Well, I think it is done. I think the government's stopping payments to it. Yes, I think it is. I think it is done. But it's no coincidence that this large Chinese aircraft looks like an aircraft. And it's very pretty looking as well. It actually, you know, it looks very nice. And that old aviation SORA, if it looks right,
Bristol
it is
freighter.
right. Well,
it's a Bristol freighter.
Exactly. It could be. Oh, it could be a Twin Otter. It could be a.
I bet the nose hinges up, eh?
The nose hinges up. Yeah, probably. Yeah. Yeah. It's a nice looking thing.
One thing we should say though, when we're talking about this, it's easy to knock the CAA and the FAA and say we've been slow. At the same time,
fly higher than that.
At the same time, what goes on in China, we don't want to be doing that here anyway. And then we know corners are cut. We've seen
they won't be at this. They won't be at this level. You can't. This company is a big company. It's very different to EHang. It's very different.
There are still bigger. There's that big player that actually makes cars. That's doing the flying car, and their test rig has literally got a zipped tie. GPS on it. So let's be fair. The corners
zip ties work.
Yeah.
I know, also just for our interaction with the CAA, I think they definitely understand the importance of trying to develop the market. But I think we certainly noticed a sea change with them in the last 6 months. But the trouble is, I think it just needs a bit of direction from the top of government ultimately.
Well, I think what would be really good is if you had some sort of, I don't know, some sort of prepared corridor ready to test your assumptions, and perhaps if you could make it work between Reading and Coventry or Milton Keynes or something like that. Rich is building this infrastructure. You must have. I mean, how much of this infrastructure is built now, Rich?
Enough of it to have a commercial service, right? And actually, wing racers and everybody's welcome to come apply to use that. We've got some exciting announcements coming in the next month or so, following some very extensive work with the regulator to get this technology in the hands of operators. What I can say about that today is it's not quite the full extent of the dream that we had when we put Skyway together. In other words, offload your navigation to the platform and have the platform deal with that for you. But it should mean that we have, for the first time in the UK, a viable pathway in unsegregated airspace to get not just one operator airborne, but several, with a means to then collect evidence in terms of flight hours, which is, it's a currency which regulators globally understand, for, increasing those operations gently and gradually over a period of time. I think that's part of the deadlock right now is that, drones have always been an emotive subject. If you're in charge of safety and you put drones in that mix too, then nobody wants to be the first person that presides over a drone incident. So there is this kind of fear. And I think the way that you tackle that fear is breaking down the problem, getting people flying safely, collecting evidence to support that, and repeating that over and over again. And, that's one of the reasons we chose this location, or rather this Skyway location, right, was because it crosses some of the most complex infrastructure we have in the UK. Goes right over railways, motorways, goes in and out of controlled airspace, near airports, military airfields, private helipads, you name it. And we wanted to kind of take that challenge right into the center of a very built up and developed area, as opposed to other alternatives, which is looking, further away. So that gives us an opportunity to get those early commercial services for people that already have, viable drone operations today, that can then modify their safety cases to leverage the underlying Skyway system.
There is going to be incidents. There is always going to be incidents, and there's no way that you can be not incident free. And I think that we need to not have this attitude of that we need to be completely perfect, and we can't. There are going to be incidents,
I think that's important as well, right?
Like using these aviation grade zip ties, I tell you.
Well, the price probably went up if they're aviation grade.
Absolutely, every 1,000 times.
Certified, yeah.
Funny you should say there'll always be incidents. Here's the Sky Elements, just arrived thanks to our man from Late Shows there. Thank you very much, Mark. Have you read through this yet, Mark, or no? Okay, so this is just arrived. This is the follow-up meeting, so we'll be reading that later. So that'll be out there on the interwebs. I'll put it up later. I'm sure it'll make very interesting reading. But you must have, Richard, for some people in the UK, you must be beginning to have, if you've built most of that infrastructure out across that area, for some authorities that want to see what's going on in the sky, be military or civil, you must be having a much higher level of detail than they have of a particular block of sky, and they must be worried that they're not the best show in town below 3,000 feet, let's say.
What I would say is we've got a really high resolution, wide area coverage of the low altitude sky around that geometry. We've got some mobile assets as well, which we frequently deploy and use and are experimenting with. And as a business, we're focused on getting the nation airborne. That's our goal. You're right, though. There's a lot of interest in the surveillance technology and capability there. I don't think it's any secret that we supported at Farnborough earlier this year at the International Air Show, and That was very interesting. I think there could have been, different responses had we not been able to provide fusion from lots of different systems, helping people understand what they're looking at. But that's ultimately what surveillance is, right? It's detecting things and understanding that picture. And that's what the Arrow system, which is the technology that sits behind Skyway, is doing every day. And so every day that those towers are online, they're recording what they see. We're learning from that. We're building up a statistical model, and we're able to compare that against the EC picture as well, right? And or often as it is the gaps in the EC. And I think that's really important too. EC always comes up, and we even spoke about it a little bit earlier. But a lot of people don't realize that EC gets worse the closer to the ground you get. And, you kind of have the inverse problem. The higher you put your antennas and the lower the aircraft are, the worse the problem is. And then you get things like acute angles and concrete surfaces, which can reflect surfaces, and water, which attenuates. So there's lots of things that we do to mitigate that. Including building our own aviation grade EC network up and down the country, right? Making sure that, in fact, I've got a team heading down to the southwest of England just tonight, actually, and getting ready to deploy some other receivers down there. And these are huge antenna arrays with battery backup systems, dual redundant communications, health monitoring, so that we can do basic things like tell the difference between the absence of data because there are no aircraft or the absence of data because your sensor's offline. There are all sorts of important aspects to think about when you're looking at just one data source like EC. So yeah, it's an impressive technology. It's got a lot better over the last couple of years, probably gone a little bit beyond our own expectations in many areas, if I'm completely honest. I think when we started, we thought the Skyway system would be good enough to spot something the size of a Cessna 172, the R variant, out to about 4 kilometers. And we've been doing testing beyond 10 in VMC. So we're really happy with that. 90 odd percent, I think it's like 93% of all the customers that we polled don't fly IFR and don't fly at night and don't fly in severe inclement weather. They want to fly VMC. And so that's where we focus the Skyway initial capabilities. But yes, we've also been testing nighttime and thermals and doing exciting things with radars as well. But for the most part, active sensing technologies are confined to further research for us. And we use mainly passive technologies to build up the picture we've got.
So do you have sensors on drones you can send out when you see something you're not sure of? Just send a drone out with a sensor on to find out?
No.
Why not?
That's a Bruce answer.
There's a business
So
case
basically,
maybe Stephen can do that for us. We'll dispatch one of the giant wind racer vehicles to
There
scare
you
other
go.
people away.
But here we have in the room, as it were, we've got someone with a large platform that needs to get a job done and trialed. We have someone that can surveil the sky. So between the two of them, they have all the bits.
But don't forget the zip ties.
Oh, they probably have zip ties. Yes,
There are a lot of zip ties involved in our infrastructure. Let's just put it that way.
RF grade ones.
Oh, that's great.
But how hard can it be? You can get these people in a room, get them talking, get them sorted, and get a really see if there is a business use case in the Orkneys, for instance. Gosh, and they probably, because they want to know where the search and rescue are. So I don't understand. Well, one of the many things I don't understand.
You're not thinking like a bureaucrat. You're not thinking.
No,
You've got to do. First of all, you got to do an assessment. Is this going to be worthwhile relationship? Then you got to do all the studies, and it'll be 6 months before you even decide to have a meeting, mate.
But what sort of biscuits? You can't. But before we do that, we've got to decide on the coffee and the biscuits first, haven't we? Yeah, all these
Start with your new
matters.
group, your industry group.
Can I jump in with a regulator point for a moment?
Aviation grade biscuits.
A couple of the CAA's got that winds people up is you've got all these VLOS operators that are doing the business. They're happy doing the business. They've been doing it for a decade. They're harming no one. They're just getting on and they're putting food on the table. And what we're doing in everything the CAA is trying to do for the future is hindering them, making their lives harder, making it more expensive. Can't we just do this BVLOS and absolutely just leave the existing VLOS people alone? Stop heaping charges on them, stop heaping complexity on them, and just let them keep on doing what they're doing, because people are just dropping it. We've got commercial operator after commercial operator after commercial operator just saying, I'm giving up. And it's, that's the position we're in at the moment. And it doesn't have to be that way. And that, for me, is the frustration. And as it's got to be the case whenever it's on.
I'm just gonna get comfortable. Hang on, I'm just getting comfortable. Yeah.
His balls about something for a moment. So I am going to put him out here on the hot spot and say, so since Baroness Suggs working for you now, when are you going to make the claim that there was no drone at Gatwick?
I love your interpretation of world affairs and news articles in general. But she doesn't work for us, right? We're privileged to have her as an advisor on our advisory board. But you know better than I know how to get secrets out of people, Ian. So I'll leave that in your capable hands.
Well, one thing I don't understand, this whole thing here, if life and property is so sacrosanct that we must dot all our I's, cross our T's, and have this massively failure-proof regulatory framework and everything, why do we still keep building airports on the seaside where there's so many birds?
Well, many things you can put like that. It is all madness. Now, Simon correctly spotted that we seem to be leading into Ian Hour, and this week's Ian Hour is it's pretty shocking. I think. I don't know what you want to say about it, Ian. I'll let you. What have you discovered this week, Ian?
Well, it's kind of shocking and not shocking at the same time, because it turns out a journalist had already uncovered bits of this, but it isn't widely known. And even though I'd heard about it, I thought it was kind of slightly, is it true? I thought it must be, but I thought it was kind of on the grapevine rather than having come out. So basically, I've had to do digging this week because the Home Office have been particularly naughty. From the tribunal process going through it, we found out that the important documents, so keep this in mind, everyone, important documents in the government departments are held on SharePoint. So the Gatwick documents that are important are held on the SharePoint system at the DFT and likely at the Home Office as well. And so they are both pushing back to stop these documents coming out, which you shouldn't be doing. It's again, it's an aviation event. It should have been in the public domain all along. Should have even taken this fight. But the Home Office have been particularly devious and said, my question to them was simply, what documents? And in fact, I'm not asking to even see the documents. I'm just saying, what Word documents, how many JPEGs, blah, 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 are on your SharePoint server to do with Gatwick. And they said, well, I can't tell you about our systems because that's breaching national security if you knew what systems we had. And they've gone to even the internal review and said that. So that's me blocked now. I've got to go to the ICO, but it's complete. It's a complete, deliberate, blatant. It could almost be a case study for future with freedom of information because you can see how it falls apart very quickly. It turns out if you go on the Home Office site, they're advertising their SharePoint jobs. Their developers have got all their SharePoint skills on LinkedIn and the projects they're working on. So it's all in the public domain. And if that wasn't worse enough, so a journalist and it took a really big, long fight, actually. It's like one of my freedom of information where it's gone on for years and it's scrolling pages down. And at the end of it all, they've got the entire Home Office freedom of information process. So it's all separate PDF documents. This is how you deal with a freedom of information request. And it specifically says in the document, if you have a request, you've to search Outlook, you've to search SharePoint, you've to search OneDrive, you've to search personal drives, you've to search paper files. So I shouldn't have even had to ask for a name SharePoint. It should have been done as standard. So the fact their own process document says it should have been searched proves that the whole thing of national security, again, because that document's in the public domain, is a lie. It's just an outright lie. And the fact that it's gone up and been escalated, so this is someone senior there that knows the process, just shows that it's a deliberate attempt to stop me getting the information.
I think lie is a strong. I think lie is a strong word. I think it's a communication failure.
Oversight.
It's an oversight. Yes.
If you have SharePoint, anyone who has SharePoint, anyone who has Microsoft 365 or whatever, and you know the apps that you have to your disposal, so everything kept, so all it's a OneDrive or whatever, that is a given. So I mean, it's fairly obvious.
Yeah, the point of getting here is it's a business having SharePoint. That isn't a national security matter. It's an everyday system. It's like saying Outlook is national security, or PowerPoint, or any of the other systems. But reading what you were getting at anyway, Gary, is that reading their document that goes through the process, it actually highlights that there is a round robin list. So there's effectively a blacklist. In fact, there's two blacklists. So there's a round robin list. So they look out to flag people that are asking more than one organization similar questions. So if, for example, I was to ask the Home Office and the DFT about Gatwick, they would tie those two up together, and then there's kind of potential liaison between them, and that being managed, which really is contrary to freedom of information, because freedom of information is supposed to be applicant and motive blind. So there's a suggestion that really it isn't quite. And then there's also a national security kind of a blacklist. There's a flagging of basically if something's considered national security, which again goes to some kind of panel for how that's dealt with. So it's showing that the freedom of information, how it's supposed to be and how it's being used, those are two different things. So it's brought to light that those things that are suspected and have been said by journalists to be the case are the case, because it's literally there in black and white. So it'll be interesting to see the latest versions of those documents to see if any of that's been softened. But because this is the process as of 4 years ago, but I doubt much of it's actually changed. So that's what's come out this week. That I've got.
And you also had a milestone number as well, didn't you? This week,
I've reached officially 250 freedom of information requests. Technically, it's slightly more, because if you do a bulk request, which I have done, I did one about 40, it's only counted as one. So really, but yeah, I've hit the official 250, which is a nice one. So for the 500. But this week I'm going to be putting in at least 4. I think it's going to hit 6 ICO complaints. Which is the biggest I've ever done in a week, but they're all necessary, because that's like, obviously you've heard with the Home Office, that's one of the more extreme ones, but they're not alone in that, and unfortunately the CAA may be one of them at this rate. If I get kind of messed about on a particular straightforward question that shouldn't even be being contested.
I'm going to go into business making voodoo dolls of you and selling it to UK departments, government departments. They'll lap them up.
No, that's grand. I think, because look, we've already gone with 12 minutes over, 13 minutes over. So I think I'm going to say going on. Here we go. There we are. Okay, yes.
There was just one thing on my mind with this to mention. Let's see if I can remember now. So we've mentioned the Home Office. We mentioned.
Whilst you're remembering, go on
the BBC. The BBC.
Oh yeah, that's good, eh?
I've actually got it took a fight, and it's annoying actually. The BBC complaints form is actually, it limits you to 1,500 words. It sounds like a lot when there's me typing and evidence. I only got 1 point in there, where really the whole report that they put out before Christmas. So this is the one where it was blatantly a story put out. So for Gatwick Airport to bring up Gatwick incident of 2018 again and try and underline it all. So that went out as a story just before Christmas. It went out in print and it went out as on the TV as well. And I went for the print one particularly because what has kept happening with Gatwick every time it's been reported is, we all know this went on for days. In fact, the first aircraft didn't take off until 45 hours into the incident. Yet every time there's a talk on Gatwick, and it's Gatwick Airport doing it, or NPCC or someone, it keeps getting, or Sussex Police, it keeps getting trimmed down. So they're making it like it's a more trivial event. So it got to the point where last it was like 36 hours. I think they've tried 34 hours. And this, the BBC, was the 30-hour incident. Well, I thought I'm not putting up with that because that puts it, the incident that's ended at 3 a.m. on the 21st, which is nonsense. So I had to use the BBC's own reports against them. So I used 5 example stories. I used their live timeline from the actual time that showed it was 45 hours in before the first aircraft even took off, for proper airliner flight out with people on it. And they actually spent quite a long time. They said, we're going to have to think about this for more. So it went on a number of weeks where normally you'll get kind of a rebuttal pretty swiftly. So it gone up to some, I assume it was the editor. Annoying thing at this point was I tagged the reporters that did the report twice. So they knew full well that I'd taken issue with the 30 hours, didn't bother to correct it. And then the BBC have come back at the end and tried to fob it off as a typo. So we're meant to put 36 and we typed 30 by mistake. And I'm like, well, I'm thinking, well, why didn't you reporters edit it when I told them rather than waiting for this complaint to go through? So yeah, fun again, but it's nice. At least they've corrected it. I've got a bit of a rubbish apology, but it does show that it is worth chipping back at them because it causes them inconvenience. It gets shown to the other editors on the editorial teams. So if one person's like continually doing bad drone stories, it will get seen by their peers. So
they'll learn how to do it themselves. Yeah.
Well, yeah, we'll say, but it shows it is worth jumping on. So hopefully, if these things happen in future, people can, give it a go. You can, especially if you use their own reports against them. That's the best tactic. If there's a previous reporting of events, if not, I did quote the Guardian and other sources as well, so you can do that. But the Guardian Gatwick thing was good initially, but then
they
again,
didn't have enough pedophiles on the Guardian.
the New Jersey stuff that was really poor. That was clickbait like everyone else. But...
Well, I believe in the comments earlier it said that Mr. Trump has said they were all authorized. Those were all authorized flights.
This is hot off the press news, so that there has been a official statement from because basically what's happened. This is really funny. There's an absolute meltdown going on in America and X at the moment because Joe Biden obviously was the former president, and his administration had quite clearly said, FBI, and put this all out, there's no malicious drones, it is hobbyists, it's people mistaking aircraft, blah, 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 blah. And then people going, and then Trump was trying to make political capital of it. Well, when I come in, I'll tell you what's really happened. So all the UAP bags are going, oh, when Trump gets in, he's going to tell us it's the UFOs, it's the aliens, it's real. And they've actually been doing like all these the podcasts and whatever they do about it, going, it's coming. And then they're all disappointed, they're all raging today because he has come out with exactly
Trump's been taken over by aliens. His body has been taken over by aliens. That's the next big conspiracy. But do you see the BBC now? They want to tax Netflix, or they want to put the broadcast license onto Netflix.
They want to do that here. They want to do that with cell phones. They want to be. They're going to get rid of the idea is to get rid of the license and just have a cell phone tax. So, yeah, traditional broadcasters are in trouble, as are traditional radar operators. But anyway, I digress. On that note, any more before we go? Going once.
Haven't they suffered enough?
Going twice. Dear viewer, wherever you are in the world, thanks very much for joining us. Don't forget 2100 Gin and Tonic next week. Stephen, thanks very much for coming. Rich, thanks very much for coming in as well. I'm looking forward to following the success and the undoubted success of Wind Racers. Cheers, everyone. See you next week. Bye. Oh, Astro. Mitchell's reminded me. Astro. Well done, Mitchell. The Astro thing was just that companies in America are beginning to say, we're going NDAA. Look at us. We're buying blue NDAA platforms. It's starting. It's beginning. It's happening. They're beginning to go that way. But now we are going. Cheers, everyone. Take care. Bye bye. Cheers now.